Good afternoon, NDC. Now, we realize after 2 days of solid, technical, hardcore content, some of you probably want something a little bit lighter. So welcome to Monads in Depth.
In F#, Haskell, and Clojure. No, we kind of said we'd do a thing, and then we didn't write it, and so we panicked and went, let's get some topical slides and get some people who think we've organised something, and we'll put them all on stage, and we'll get them to talk about stuff, and we'll probably get away with that. And let's face it, we didn't put any description or anything on the talk in the program, so no one's going to come anyway.
So I'm curious, all of you who've come here to watch a talk with no description, no topic, what are you expecting to see? What are you hoping to get out of this? Okay, well, you're happy. We've done that already. So, yes, everyone welcome. What we're going to be doing for the next hour, we've picked a series of, stories about technology, things that are in the news, innovations that have hit the headlines recently, software, hardware, technology, culture, all these kinds of things. And we're just going to chat about it, or joke about it, explore some of the ideas. We've got some contributions from the people who are on the panel here. Anyone has any questions at any point, anything you want to ask us, anything you think would be fun to talk about, just shout. We'll do it. And then the other thing, we got another talk, and then we have the party this evening. So, first thing we are going to talk about...
Do you want to maybe be a bit less rude and introduce our special guests?
The first thing we're going to talk about is our special guests. Mark, would you like to introduce our special guests?
So, on my side over here, I have Jimmy Bogard, creator of AutoMapper, for which he is very sorry.
Which is so good that Microsoft are now trying to reinvent it, aren't they? That's the mark of success for any .NET open source project, is when they go, no, we need a shitty half-baked implementation of this built into Visual Studio. So congratulations. Sorry, more lightweight.
Yeah, you've made it. And L
Waters.
Sorry?
L Waters.
L Waters at the end. And do you want to introduce yourself and say what you do?
Hi, guys. This is my second time at NDC. Clearly the best conference circuit anywhere. It really is fantastic. I am, this is a very fancy title, the Director of Strategy at Simply Accessible, which means I get to dream up total bullshit, and then the rest of the team has to figure it out. So that's my role, and we want to have an inclusive and awesome world for everybody.
Thank you.
And on my side of the panel, Felina, would you like to tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Felina. I'm a professor at Delft University of Technology, where I research programming for kids.
Awesome. Do any of them write Gunman Taco Truck games?
Not yet.
There's a niche there. And Ian Cooper. Coop, tell us who you are and what you do.
I feel a bit overwhelmed. I'm next to a professor and director of strategy. I know, right, exactly. Yes, I'm Ian Cooper. I'm an architect for a company called Huddle. The thing I'll tell you about, even though it's not in my claim to fame, is I work on an open source library called Brighter for all of your CQRS and tasks you need. You should go and check us out. We've got a new .NET Core release out today. So there you go.
Awesome. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the biggest technology event that is happening anywhere in the world at the moment, which is PubCon.
Who's coming to PubCon? Right, you're wrong. I want you all to put your hands up and then sort yourself out with tickets immediately after this talk.
So who's coming to PubCon?
It's going to be awesome. So who's coming? Yeah, there we go.
So PubCon is the official NDC after party. It's at the Scotsman down in town tomorrow night. Tickets are still available online. It's lightning talks from some of the speakers here. It's a kind of irreverent, hilarious, funny take on technology and what it's like working in tech. There is free food. There is free beer. It's a really awesome party. Get tickets. Come down. Join us tomorrow evening.
Basically, the speakers have created a slide deck. There's 20 slides in the deck. The slides go for 15 seconds each. They don't get to control what's happening with the slide, so they have to try and keep up. It's the most complicated kind of talk to write because you have to plan everything out, or you just make very long pauses because you've worked out the next slide's not there for there it is, and then you can carry on. But no, it's an awesome time, and you just drink beer and laugh at people getting it wrong.
So yeah, come to PubConf. So, this happened. Does anyone recognize this? Did anyone get this on their own screen? Okay, good. So was that a hand? No, I don't think so.
Nobody from the British National Health Service in then.
Nobody from the British National Health Service in then. No, I don't think so.
No,
So yeah, this was the WannaCry, which was a ransomware worm that last month basically spread throughout computer networks in Europe. It took Phone Telefonica got completely knocked out. It took out a massive chunk of the British health service. It didn't affect British Airways. They managed to go down all by themselves for an entire extended weekend.
Yeah, British Airways hadn't upgraded to Windows XP yet, so they weren't vulnerable.
But, this made headlines, and it got a lot of press, and there were a lot of people saying, why was the NHS still running on these old, outdated machines? And it generally, I think, raised a lot of interesting questions about, computer security and vulnerability. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting here, the message that pops up here says, sure, we guarantee you can recover all your files, but you have not so enough time. You can decrypt some of your files for free. It's like, thank you for that. And it says, we have free events for users who are so poor they couldn't pay in 6 months. Now, if the National Health Service is not the most impoverished user you've ever seen, like, we got 800,000 hospitals and no money. Can you please decrypt our files? So were any of you on the panel, were you affected by this? Did it affect any of your work systems? Were any of you having, hospital appointments or trying to make a phone call in Spain when this was going on?
Jimmy, you do a lot of work with big enterprises. Were any of...
Yeah, so most critical infrastructure is built on really rock-solid hardware and software, like Windows XP, of course. So there were a few manufacturing facilities in the States that did go down because they smartly connected their critical infrastructure to the internet on Windows XP, unpatched since last millennium, perhaps. So that happened.
We also have a lot of large clients, but I think they're all wrestling. America has its own kind of virus, which is not really populated here. That's a different thing that you see in the news. A different kind of virus, much harder to get rid of. But that would be it. But I think it's true. I think of all the industries that we work with, airline industries actually have the most legacy software. And when you consider the impact of that, given that there's actual physical safety involved in some of their decision making, it's a pretty frightening aspect. It actually did trigger conversations. We don't really provide any kind of service or help in that area, but it did trigger conversations with a lot of our airline clients.
Yeah, the thing that amused me most about this story was that the attack was stopped by some 20-year-old surf bum in Cornwall, wasn't it? Essentially, it was looking through the code and saw, oh, there's a domain there, and saw it hadn't been registered. I'll have that then, and then stopped the attack by accident. So we are dependent now on national infrastructure on 20-year-old surfers in Cornwall, which is a plan, I guess.
Because the other thing with this is that the actual payload or the method of distribution was dumped as part of a set of files that were stolen from the NSA, which the NSA had discovered this vulnerability in Windows, and rather than do the responsible thing and say to Microsoft, hey, there's a vulnerability in Windows that you might want to patch in case we get attacked by some of our cyber enemies, they decided they would hang on to it in case they needed it. And then someone leaked a whole bunch of things from the NSA, and so America's national security compromised America's national security, which is an interesting approach to national security.
See, the rest of the world, we call that irony, but I don't think they have a name for it in America. So the 20-year-old guy...
I think they just call it government.
The guy from Cornwall who actually stopped the attack, you know how the British media rewarded him? They doxed him. They published his real name. They published his photo. They sent reporters who were knocking on his ex-girlfriend's door and all this kind of stuff. It was actually pretty sickening, to see the way this guy's been doing, undercover security research. His Twitter account doesn't have his real name because, you do security, you potentially upset some people with questionable motives. The British tabloid press may, God indict their souls, went, yeah, let's tell everyone where he lives. That'll be a really good way of saying thank you for this. So,
although to be fair, he's lucky he wasn't a woman, because otherwise they would have been looking for dodgy pictures, and yes, the British tabloid press is not something we're proud of.
The other thing I don't really understand about these ransom demands, though, is that they demand that you pay them in Bitcoin, and it seems like the average user is really going to struggle to actually pay anybody in Bitcoin, right? Right, yeah, I mean...
Yeah, send $300 worth of... Sorry, what was the question?
I have Doge coins.
So the question is, do any one of us have bitcoins?
Is dog-based internet money?
No, I don't have any
future.
bitcoins. I saw something recently that said if I'd bought like $1,000 worth of Bitcoin in 2010, I would be a millionaire now, which is kind of depressing.
Yeah, but if you'd bought $1,000 worth of dollars, you'd still have $1,000. Think about that.
Well, yeah, and actually that would be worth more than the equivalent pounds now, so I should have done that
If you bought $1,000 worth of euros.
Yeah.
I don't have bitcoins. I have the pound, which is a very hard, stable currency.
Strong and stable.
I have no need for bitcoins.
So my husband's a really big fan of cryptocurrencies. So we have a myriad of unusual kind of startup currencies. Bitcoin is one, but that's like old news to him, and there's a few others. But recently, I've been reading about instead of IPOs, ICOs. Are you guys familiar with that? Where people buy into it by creating their own currency. And they even have, of course, wherever there's an idea, there's an attorney nearby to help you make that work, right? So there's a law firm that will help you set up an ICO, and it's the way a lot of people are thinking about. Instead of venture capital, it's a much more sort of egalitarian way for people to kind of opt in to being almost a shareholder, and they're helping fund software apps before they actually, have to go and do rounds of funding. And I kind of like that idea because it's sort of for the people in a way, until, of course, that law firm gets involved. But otherwise, it's really interesting.
And speaking of law firms getting involved, disruptors and funding, let's talk about Uber.
Yeah. So, yes, Uber, the ongoing bin fire. How much have they had in? Is it $3 billion they've had in funding? So who has anything they want to say about Uber?
Actually, I got one thing to say. We were talking about vulnerability on airlines, and now we're talking about Uber. And if any of you saw the keynote yesterday, I was talking about GPS. And researching that, I did a lot of reading about how GPS works. And Newark Airport in New Jersey, they put in a GPS landing system for, big passenger airliners. And it just kept breaking. Like a plane would be on final approach, and suddenly all the instruments would go haywire, and they'd have to land it using, visual recognition. And it turned out that this was a guy he was a delivery driver, and his company had put GPS in his truck, and he didn't want them to know that he was going to this bar when he was supposed to be working. So he bought a $100 GPS jammer from Radio Shack. And when he went and parked in this bar off the Jersey Turnpike, this knocked out air traffic control. The GPS signal that we get from the satellite is as weak as if you're trying to read a book in London by candlelight and the candle is in Rome. That's how much energy actually makes it through. So it's actually trivial to jam these kind of things. So every time, something like Uber or traffic control, these systems, they rely on GPS. And it's interesting to realize, that faintest whisper of signal is enough for you to get your phone out your pocket and go, I'm going to order a cab and hope that they don't then track my location for the next 24 hours so they know exactly where I'm going after I get there.
So I think that my favorite part of this Uber story is how much the Uber company talks about how much he's matured over the past year. For a 40-year-old man, oh, my God. Nothing.
Oh, I don't have much to say. I don't have a leather jacket, and I don't need to worry about any of that.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting how Uber, many companies, but especially Uber, is presented as disruption, where it's almost fake news what they're doing, because they're driving down the prices because they got $3 billion in investments, and then the plan is just to bankrupt all competitors and then be a monopoly. It's not disruption at all.
As far as I can tell, that is the Silicon Valley VC model, is get somebody to pay you money until all your competitors have gone bankrupt because nobody was giving them money, and then you can jack your prices up, assuming that with $3 billion you can make your company last long enough to actually do that, you idiot!
Exactly. The only thing you have to do is not be a complete fool and turn everyone against you, and they can't even do that.
Exactly. And, I mean, the guy who they've actually fired over this, Michael, whatever his name is, I wanted to say Elphick, but that was a guy called Boone in the UK.
And this is the one that said if you have more ladies on the board, then that will lead to more talking.
Yes, yeah. Ladies, they be talking and shopping. But, you know, I mean, quite apart from the fact that this guy has been a sexual predator around the whole of Silicon Valley for the last 20 years, he's the guy who went, let's go into China, and that completely tanked. I mean, everything this guy has touched has turned to absolute crap. And yet it takes this to finally get the guy fired. And he's just going to walk off and get another position at some other Silicon Valley company. The whole thing just needs to... We need Lex Luthor. We need Lex Luthor to come along with his nuclear warheads and just blow up the San Andreas fault, and the whole thing can just fall into the sea, and then we'll have Arizona Bay, like Bill Hicks used to talk about. Oh, yeah.
Well, what's also interesting, I think, in the Uber story is that the role of social media, and there was this one female engineer that said, these are all the things that happened to me, and at least one of the things that's positive about this story is that a similar thing happened at GitHub maybe 3 years ago, where there was also a female employee saying, well, it's all shit here. And then nothing really happened in the public view of GitHub. But now in Uber, because it's an accumulation of things, at least people are taking her story seriously, and there's some damage done to this company, which I think is good compared to a few years ago when these stories also happened. And this is happening for decades, of course. The upside is people are taking it seriously, and probably he will also be fired. Do we want to do a little bet on how long he will still be the CEO of Uber? I'm taking some money for that.
So what we're actually going to do is going to be 1 against 1. Who do you think is going to last longer, Travis Kalanick or Trump? Go for an accumulator. They're both gone by Christmas. And we've cancelled Brexit. That would be lovely.
Yeah, that would be the best. Okay, we've got a little video for you now.
We'd like you to watch a short film about health and safety.
It is terrifying.
As our world becomes increasingly digitized, so does our ability to connect with it. Imagine if you could search your surroundings the same way you search the web. Using existing cameras and advances in AI, we can now find things and people in the real world in real time and take action to improve safety and well-being. When a dangerous spill occurs in a chemical plant, cameras recognize the incident. Information about the spill is instantly shared with the people who need it the most, enabling them to protect other employees from coming in contact with the hazard and clean it up. This technology can also help keep people safer in hospitals. Patients recovering from heart surgery are limited to how much they should exert themselves. When someone exceeds the prescribed level of activity, a nurse is alerted. What's more, the location of the closest wheelchair is identified, so that the nurse can quickly get the patient seated and safe. This technology is also useful in an environment like a construction site, where people who need specialized tools are spread out, sometimes across multiple floors. Using cameras already in place, this technology can identify a specific tool, as well as the closest authorized person who can deliver it, saving everyone time and keeping the workflow moving. The digital and physical worlds are coming together to help make everyone more safe, secure, and productive. And we're bringing the edge of Microsoft's cloud to any device.
Because you really want a hot saw that's connected to the internet.
Well, I don't know about you, but I, for one, bow to our new Microsoft corporate computer vision overlords.
I mean, that technology is just so not open to abuse. What could possibly go wrong with computers monitoring everything?
What disturbs me is that, as far as I'm aware, many accidents come from people walking along looking at their phones. But now it says that if I work in an industrial plant, I must walk along looking at my phone the whole time in order to avoid accidents. That doesn't seem that's going to work very well.
There's really only two problems, two failures that this would have, right? People and software. Other than that, it's fantastic. I think about the fact that the people that they put in this video are the people least likely to adopt new technology and new ways of working. And you think we're talking about security risks and everything. Hospitals, construction zones, I can't imagine that they would be, say, upgrading straight from Windows XP to something that's practically like AR in the use of the workplace.
Yeah, you're being too negative. I see lots of opportunities here. You think of all those power plants that will run on XP still. We could not hijack their computers, but their saws. And their wheelchairs. Like the NHS is apparently very open to this type of stuff. We've not hijacked all the they can do without computers, but they really can do without the wheelchairs.
That's why they've started patching Windows XP again. They're preloading this onto all those machines. It's fantastic. Did anyone here ever, in the 80s, he said, showing his age, play a role-playing game called Paranoia? Yeah, where the dungeon master equivalent was like the computer, and the computer wanted you to be happy, and you just had to be happy all the time. And you can just, this is the thin end of the wedge that ends up with someone saying to a computer, make humans happy all the time, and the computer
Employee number 27, the machine has detected you are depressed. Report to the processing area for mandatory fun.
That is where this ends. Also, good barrel recognition. Well done.
So there were two things I noticed in this one. One, did you notice the look on the faces when they saw the notification for the barrel, that they all knew exactly who spilled it? They're like, Daryl, spilt the barrel again. And the other one was, I noticed there was not one single Windows phone in any of those devices they looked at. So they know too. Yeah, this is the future. No Windows phones.
Yeah, no, it had to be realistic.
Okay.
Oh, yay.
Our great
Hooray
leader.
for this woman, yeah. So, yes, Theresa May has lost an election and is still Prime Minister.
So Theresa May has lost an election by winning. Jeremy Corbyn won an election by losing. We've still got the same government, although we don't actually have them anymore. Theresa May, who has repeatedly denied she does U-turns, has gone on record as saying, I got us into this thing, I'll get us out of it. If that doesn't sound like the textbook definition of a U-turn, I honestly don't know what is. And yeah, we live in interesting times. And one of the things that's interesting is our government think they can stop terrorism by banning end-to-end encryption. Does anyone have anything to say about that?
I noted the other day that apparently the chief conspirators in the Tory party looking to replace Theresa May, Boris Johnson and others, all the journalists keep saying, I got to look at his WhatsApp messaging and I could see what was going on. So I'm suspicious that Theresa May's real objective is actually to prevent the people in the Tory party who want to stab her in the back communicating secretly about their chances. And she doesn't care about the terrorists at all.
I think that my other favorite thing about Theresa is that because she's doing a bad job, it's going to set women in politics back decades, because there weren't any bad men in politics before. It's good times.
Before or now? All the men in politics I can think of are doing a smashing job.
This is complete. I mean, this is a typical case. Basically, David Cameron, a man, made a complete and total mess of things, and then left it alone and expected a woman to clean it up for him.
Yeah, there's a name for that.
That's the way the world works.
Actually, this is a thing. It's called the glass cliff. That if there's a situation that's almost irrescuable, that they put a female leader there. Same happened at Yahoo, where, I mean, Yahoo wasn't doing very well when Marissa Mayer went there. So it's a job that no one really wants to take. And then it's celebrated as an achievement for now we have a female CEO or we have a female prime minister. But the situation is so dire that they're never going to do it well anyway. It's a thing.
But the thing that, I mean, we also have the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, who said that we need to get people looking at this end-to-end encryption problem, people who understand the necessary hashtags. And I'm thinking Amber Rudd doesn't know what hashtags are and doesn't understand anything about encryption. Yeah, and they seem to think that if they can get WhatsApp to put backdoors in so that they can read WhatsApp messages, that they will then be able to trap terrorists, because terrorists will continue to use WhatsApp. Whereas, of course, if terrorists know that they've put a backdoor into WhatsApp, then they're not going to use it. They're going to use Signal or Telegram or one of these other services. And if it comes down to it, they'll just write their own, because it's really not difficult to pull an off-the-shelf encryption library and, you know, Signal R, and write your own encrypted messaging application that the government doesn't have a backdoor to. And that then made me think, I reckon they've already put a backdoor into WhatsApp, and all this kerfuffle about WhatsApp saying, no, we're not putting in a backdoor, we're taking a moral and principled stand, is just a smokescreen, so that the terrorists do carry on using WhatsApp, which there is a backdoor in, so that Theresa can read Boris's messages about stabbing her in the back.
But this actually
That's
is a
the theory.
situation where we could do something. I mean, what Microsoft is doing with crazy AI in the workplace, but we can educate all our friends and family about what end-to-end encryption is. It's not that difficult to explain to people that we know. So this is something, at least a situation that we could resolve slightly by making sure that more people understand what encryption is and isn't. So maybe that's a takeaway, that we know what it means. And we can help people understand.
I tried to explain it to my mother-in-law. I don't know the necessary hashtags.
You just know that Theresa May is one of those people that has the password written on the whiteboard, doesn't she?
Dylan, didn't you say something about instead of banning end-to-end encryption, it was about banning lorries, and that would actually solve the problem?
So this, on a sort of slightly more serious note, we've had these 2 terrorist incidents in London where I live in the last month, where somebody has driven a car or a truck into a load of people on a crowded street. And, this last thing, they drove a van into a group of pedestrians and then jumped out and started stabbing people. And I'm thinking, well, how did people buy vans and knives before we invented encryption? Clearly this is the problem here. But, you could ban vehicles in crowded areas a lot more easily than you could ban crypto. So we already license vehicles, You have to have you need to prove your identity to acquire one. The government keep track of where they are. If you have a vehicle that's unregistered, you're already breaking the law. Yeah. We have cameras in London that will track the movement of vehicles and say, whose car was it? Where did it go? Who did it belong to? Was it supposed to be there? And there are millions and millions of people in London who don't even have a driving license, let alone a car.
But isn't it already in the Magna Carta, though? You have a right to a lorry?
No, you're thinking of the Texas edition of the Magna Carta, Jimmy.
Yeah.
You have the right to a truck. You have the right to a pair of those what do you call them, truck nuts. You have a right to barbecue. You have the right to bear arms. You have the right to arm bears. But no, seriously, if you want to prevent incidents where people are using vehicles as weapons, have a serious conversation about not letting anyone who wants to drive a truck into the middle of London. Why do they need to do that?
You could solve the problem by getting Uber to just take over all the trucks in London.
Yeah, how do you radicalize a self-driving truck? Maybe that's a big question for the next generation.
So it's always the case, though, with public figures, especially those who are kind of behind the times, to recognize they look at the problem the wrong way, right? It's not a technological problem. It's a human problem. And ultimately, no amount of de-encryption or encryption or anything technological that people do to stop any kind of radicalized terrorist behavior is going to work, because ultimately it starts back way before then when it comes to people. And people, that's hard, right? And that's messy, and that involves more investment on people's time. And that's why, look for the easy fix, and we'll fix the next problem after that.
And you have to remember, this is people who think that banning end-to-end encryption is the easy fix, which shows you how much they understand about.
No, it certainly can't be. We just keep dropping bombs on them. That can't be what's going on. No, of course not.
Maybe if we can get Microsoft to do the make sure people are happy thing, and then they'll be able to head this sort of thing.
Solution?
I do. I think that's the solution. Yeah, put a computer in charge.
Will this run Windows XP?
Yes,
because it'll
have to run on all versions of Windows. Actually, it'll run on MS-DOS 6.
5 was better. 6 was for hipsters.
Let's have that argument. Do you have an opinion on MS-DOS 5 version? Okay.
So let's move on. Let's move on to
something a bit happier.
Something happy and positive, which I thought was awesome. So did anyone see this, which did the rounds? A kindergarten teacher in the United States sent a thank you note to the producers of the new Wonder Woman movie. And it's this list of things. She says, on Monday, a boy who was obsessed with Iron Man told me he'd asked his parents for a Wonder Woman lunchbox. This girl had her parents revamp her Beauty and the Beast birthday party in 3 days because she had to have a Wonder Woman party. There's a girl who refuses to listen to you unless you address her as Wonder Woman.
There's the boy who threw his candy wrapper on the floor and a 5-year-old girl screamed, "Don't pollute, you idiot. That's why there are no men in Themyscira." It's just...
So yeah, this is, the Wonder Woman movie is out. It's done incredibly well. It's broken box office records. DC finally seemed to have worked out how to make a superhero movie that isn't a flop. What do they have? They had Green Lantern. Did anyone actually watch Green Lantern? Yeah, I watched that movie twice. I watched it on a plane, and it was so bad that my memory erased any recollection. And then I watched it again. Halfway through, I was like, no, I did see this. It's really that bad.
I mean, the Christopher Nolan Batman films were okay, especially Dark Knight, because that was awesome, but they were also very gritty and everything. But, yeah, and then Batman versus Superman. How can you make that bad? How can you take Batman versus... How can that be a bad movie? But he did it. Fair play to him, he did it.
He started with the title.
Yeah, it's obviously Batman's going to win.
I'm going to make the slightly serious point. So, as the parent and step-parent to a couple of mixed-race children, one a boy, one a girl, there is something incredibly powerful about them seeing representations of people who look like them. So when Star Wars The Force Awakens came out, Tanai, who's the oldest, he finally saw a hero that looked like him on the screen, and it has a powerful effect. And Enzi, the youngest, loves Rey, wandered around being Rey for like days. And, when you are the beneficiary, like I am, of white male privilege, it's very easy not to understand how powerful that can be to see people that look like you. And for, that, I don't know whether Wonder Woman is a good movie or not, but actually for people to get representation in a heroic role for women is, there's obviously 50% of the world who that can appeal to, right? And it's really genuinely good that people are actually trying to take this issue on seriously, because, when people need representation.
So I don't know if you saw... There was a related story, too, where a movie theater in the States had a female-only screening of women-only screening, of which courts stirred up all the men's right activists out there, which is just hilarious by itself, who were like, we didn't have a men's-only screening of, Iron Man, things like that. But it wasn't the first time that the Draft House had done this. They actually had one a few years earlier. Do you remember the male stripper movie with...
I know, it's Mighty Mike.
Magic Mike. They had one with Magic Mike, and literally no one complained because no one cared.
I think it's really interesting because I think this is a fantastic character. I think it's fantastic for being able to show and represent strong women. I look forward to the day when people aren't having that discussion, and where it's because it's a good movie and maybe because the character is really good. I do think, though, that looking at Marvel characters, I think that they've shied away from some things, and they're still kind of chicken shit, because there's some fantastic gay superheroes. I don't see a movie about Quicksilver, and I think that would be awesome. And I think that there's opportunity to go ahead and just, blast that diversity into that space, because it exists in comic books now, and it used to not so much. And so if it does, and people are really on the hook for it, what I really love is the idea of unsuspecting, especially in the United States, unsuspecting children in these Midwestern, areas where they have absolutely no exposure to anything except for very, quote-unquote, traditional, quote-unquote, family values, and they could go and see something in a very powerful depiction. I think that's what I'd like to see next, is the Quicksilver movie.
I just got visions of some kid, they get through it. Okay, they're from outer space. Okay, they have magical powers. Okay, they can stop time and they can run through walls. And then they're like, what do you mean they like guys? I can't believe this. I can't cope with this. This is stretching my, suspension of disbelief too far. But, I think you're right. The way to do it, you get people to engage and relate with a character, and then you throw in something that makes them question their own perspective on it. That's how you get people to think.
Problem is, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they killed Quicksilver. Because he was the guy who got shot at rescuing Hawkeye at the end of Age of Ultron. But there is still Quicksilver in the Fox X-Men thing, so maybe they could do it with him. Yeah.
Well, we're laughing about that suspension of disbelief thing, but did you know that there was a Doctor Who producer that actually opposed black people in one of their history stories, because they said, no, there were no black people in England in that age period. So this was a producer of Doctor Who that made that same argument that we're all laughing about. So it's something that still happens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can time travel. And also, Doctor Who can like shapeshift every so and so many years, but not into a female body because, of course, that's not possible. How?
Yeah. The good thing about the new Wonder Woman movie, though, is that she no longer changes from like her alter ego into Wonder Woman by doing a twirl. Because if you remember the Wonder Woman series from the 1970s, she used to go and do a spin, and then she was Wonder Woman with big pants.
A lot of interesting trends from the restricted special effects. Do you remember there was a show called Manimal? It was about a detective who could turn into animals. And basically, like the first 6 episodes, every episode you tune in to go, what animal is he going to turn into this week? And he turned into a panther and a hawk and a horse and a snake. And they only had enough budget to film 6 transformations. Like, they spent 80% of their budget on these incredible animated effects, and the other 20% on, acting and screenplays and story. And the 7th episode, it's like there was no new animal. And it got one more episode, and then they're like, yes, it's people just only tuned in to see, and the effects were so prohibitive, they realized no one was actually tuning in because they didn't care about the story. They just wanted to see these amazing transformation sequences. Anyway, speaking of aliens with superpowers...
Elon Musk.
Let's
talk about him.
So we have another short film for you. This is the promotional film for Elon's new thing, which is The Boring Company.
So this started just because he was stuck in traffic in Los Angeles on the freeway. And he's actually doing this. He's bought a tunnelling machine and he started digging a tunnel underneath SpaceX. And it's just, when did he have the idea? It was like around Christmas, wasn't it? Somewhere around there. If I had had that idea around Christmas, I wouldn't have had that video finished by now. I would still be kind of trying to model the car or something. It's just so. I mean, and Elon Musk generally. What do we think about Elon Musk?
I think Elon Musk is a. There are 2 theories as to Elon Musk. One of them, he is an alien who is trapped here, and the only way he can get home is to kind of bootstrap human technology to the point where we have warp drives. So at first he's like, okay, I need to make enough money to do this, so he invented PayPal. And then he's like, right, off the back of PayPal, I need a way of kind of bootstrapping that business, developing battery technology, so I'm going to invent Tesla.
And then Tesla hair plugs along the way as well.
He did what?
He got hair plugs along the way as well.
No, that's alien cyber brain implants. Those are antenna, Jimmy. Pay attention. Off the back of that, he's like, now I have enough money to start my own rocket company, and he started SpaceX. So we're doing stuff that you're looking at and going, why did NASA never do this? I love NASA. I love spaceflight. I'm watching SpaceX and thinking, he's actually doing stuff from like comic books from the 1950s. The rocket that goes straight up and then it lands just straight down again, like they're playing the film in reverse. Every time I see that, it blows my mind. So I think Elon Musk is an alien who is trying to fund his way back to Alpha Centauri by bootstrapping human technology.
Now, is he the one that tries to get the blood of younger people into him to help him live longer?
No, that's Dracula.
That's Gavin Belson from Silicon Valley. Yeah, who I think is supposed to be Larry Page more than anybody else, or Sergey Brin, or Eric Schmidt, or someone like that.
This is what I was going to ask. What's the second theory?
The other theory is that he's from the future, and in the future he invented time travel, but there's not a lot of money to be made from time travel, and so he went, oh, how can I make money from I know, I'll go back and invent all these things that other people invented, and I'll get the credit for them just by doing it a year early. So actually human evolution and progress has been accelerated by 1 year because he came back and started PayPal a year before whoever was really supposed to start PayPal, and then Tesla, and then SpaceX, and whatever else he's going to do along the way.
The reason I like Elon Musk is, you remember there used to be that meme that would go around a few years ago, which was kind of like all these billionaires and no one's chosen to be Batman, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder Elon was listening to that and he thought, wow, I'm a billionaire. I'm going to be Iron Man, right? I'm going to be Tony Stark, right? And it's brilliant, right? Because, if I was a billionaire, I'd start international rescue. For those of you I know in the UK, basically, that love that TV show, I'd build Tracy Island and I'd have all my planes, right?
And a rocket that launches from under the swimming pool.
You have noticed that Richard Branson has his own island, his own helicopter, his own rocket, his own train, yeah?
Does this mean some of our billionaires have genuinely taken on the mantle of becoming our favourite childhood science fiction show characters? It could be true. Any other billionaires around we can figure out? Who is Bill Gates trying to be, basically?
Well, see, because you don't hear an awful lot about Bill Gates, I reckon he must be doing the evil billionaire thing. And he's got a volcano lair somewhere in the South Pacific and a monorail.
Or maybe he's into ransomware.
Well, yeah, that could be it.
No, he's just too busy curing malaria. That's all. Just for saving millions of
They
lives.
did actually. When the Gates Foundation set out to eradicate malaria, they turned to a bunch of, climatologists and who are the people who do insects? Etymologists or entomologists? Entomologists.
I think it's bugtologists.
Bugtologists.
Yeah.
And I said to them, what would be the environmental impact of rendering mosquitoes extinct? And they went away and they came back, Bill, we can't actually see one. We're not sure what they do. They certainly don't help, and we get rid of them if you can.
No. They store blood and DNA in amber for the future, so that you can create, so that in the future, when humans have become extinct, people will be able to dig up fossilized mosquitoes and create human park, and then we'll escape and run amok in the cockroach city of the future, stamping on them all like this. Hey.
No, but I like to think at one point all the billionaires got together and they decided, I'm going to be Iron Man, and someone else is saying, I'm going to build international rescue, and they turned around and said, Larry, we're going to need a supervillain,
Oh, by the way, one of my favorite Twitter accounts is Bored Elon Musk. You should look it up. It's other absurd ideas that are probably not that absurd in about a year or two. Like, he'll probably come up with those things, I think, yeah.
One of my favorite Twitter accounts ever, there was an account called Peter Molyneux, who was Peter Molyneux from Bullfrog, but it was like these weird games. And he's like, what about a driving simulator where you play the road? So just before we move on, I got one thing I want to say. This is a lovely idea that someone on my team at work suggested recently, which is, what if Git was sent back in time to teach people's minds to cope with the idea of non-linear history, so that when we get time travel, we're all psychologically prepared for it? Yeah? Okay, so let's move on. So let's talk about PubCon.
Yeah, who's going to PubCon?
So who's going to PubCon?
There are actually fewer hands now than there were before. We're driving people away from PubCon. It's backfiring. Stop immediately. Okay, but come, it's going to be great.
So
3D printing and prosthetics, and so people can now design their own prosthetics.
So by show of hands, how many cyborgs are there in the room?
Who's augmented in any way? I mean,
anybody with any kind
LASIK,
of,
LASIK would count. You've had yourself lasered to affect your
laser
eyesight.
eye surgery. Anyone?
I'm wearing contact lenses, so they're removable, but
anyone with something that's not reversible or removable.
Yeah, it's just pins in your leg from a skiing accident. Come on, this is Norway. There must be loads of skiing accidents here.
The way they learn to ski in Norway, at the age of 6, they start ski jumping. And they go bigger and bigger. If you go up to the Sky Bar in the Radisson, you look out, there's this thing on the horizon. And people go, what the hell is that? And you say, it's a ski jump. And they go, don't be ridiculous. And you're like, no, that's actually a ski jump. They learn to ski, and they ski jump, and they ski jump. And then when they're 16, and they get that whole kind of macho teenage adolescent thing.
Yeah.
And they die horribly in the biggest ski jumping accident you've ever seen. And the rest of them stop skiing.
That makes perfect sense then.
No,
That's why there's no Norwegian word for chav.
Because one, they don't do it down hills; they do it on the flat, which is just I can't even imagine. And they do it in summer around the town hall with rollerblade wheels on the end of the skis. Anyway, yes, this is this increasing trend, which I think is awesome, about using 3D printing to custom produce prostheses and prosthetic limbs and, the whole theme of biological augmentation and using technology to make humans better, to recover from injuries and illnesses and also just to enhance what people can do. What do you think about that, panel?
Yeah, well, this is the kind of thing that we work with a lot. I am one of the few people who absolutely embraces the singularity. And so I had like a whole talk a couple of years ago about bring it on, absolutely, because the benefits for people, for human beings, I am all for it. And, it has absolutely no track record for failure of involving machines in what we do. So why not? Absolutely. But I have friends who are blind and who are looking for robot eyes any day at this point. And, 10 years ago, that seemed like sort of crazy science fiction. But every single day when you look in the news, you find other kinds of technology and other kinds of advances. And so I think we're only limited by our own imagination and by our own sort of antiquated idea about ethics, morality, and personhood. And so, I'm all for it.
So did you see, this was a story in the news last week. This is a guy who has had a video camera made that he's got a prosthetic eye, so he already wears a glass eye, and he's had a prosthetic camera made that will fit inside his eye. So basically he can walk around filming all the time, just filming whatever he's looking at. And, has to then go and replay the footage later and watch it using his other eye, obviously. But, this is kind of the first step, because, it's not Google Glass, this isn't spectacles, this is completely, invisible. I think this is awesome. I think this is really, really interesting direction to be going in.
I'm pretty sure this is a Black Mirror episode, too.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, there's an interesting question. How on earth are we ever going to make that safe? I totally agree with you that there are so many possibilities, and changing what we think is still a person is totally good, and if it helps people, we should embrace it. But how on earth are we going to make it safe?
I mean, the other thing is, so at the moment we've got a lot of research being done to create prosthetics for people who've lost limbs or were born without limbs in some cases, or who have lost their eyesight or whatever. But when we get to the point where that sort of camera that you can put in to replace an eye has better resolution and a zoom function and things that normal eyes just don't do, then you're going to get healthy people going to the doctor and saying, I have RSI. I've been typing for a living and using a mouse for a living for the last 25 years, and my wrist hurts. I can't play the piano anymore. I mean, I couldn't play the piano before, but now when I try and play the piano, it hurts. So at what point do I get to go, you know what, you've got a prosthetic hand that and like forearm and everything, and it gives sensation and it's got the full dexterity, so I could play piano with it. Cut off my mainly healthy, just a little bit sore arm and replace it with a prosthetic. But at some point, you're going to get this elective prostheses. I want both my healthy eyes ripped out and replaced with new eyes that can see in the infrared spectrum and have a zoom function and a record function so that I can watch stuff later. And
they run on Windows XP.
Right.
I do actually, your question there about security, James Mickens did a great keynote here 2 years ago about security, and there's an essay of his that I love. He's talking about information security, and at the end he says, the problem with, digital security and all this kind of stuff is it's like riding a motorcycle. The things that are safe are not exciting, and the things that are exciting are never going to be safe. And, you have to make the decision. You have to decide, are you going to wait? By the time this stuff is safe, is secure, it's not going to be innovative anymore. It's not going to be cool. It's just going to be, every day. Like going to the doctor and getting injections for flu vaccinations or something. That used to be cutting-edge medical research that people published, and now it's routine. And so, I think it will get safe and secure. It's just by the time it does, no one will be asking the question anymore because it's routine. It's every day.
I think our definition of safe is a very interesting one. I think about that every time I fly and go through the theater that is known as security, customs, and things like that, TSA, because I think safety is a presentation of low-level hurdles for the obvious things, and then it's largely perception. after that. So taking off shoes and, oh, now it's laptops and this kind of stuff. It's such a reactionary, limited viewpoint about the mastermind criminality of the human race. I mean, we are so devious by nature that I really don't think that there's any way that you can completely secure anything. And so I think it's inevitable that this will be adopted and it will have security flaws and something will happen and people will respond to it. And then at some point, you know, we may feel the need to go analog and we'll rebel against those things. But I really do look at it as, you know, it's perception. And so really make it a little less easy to hack is usually the goal, I think, these days.
So maybe show of hands. Who would put stuff in their body, electronics, that isn't open source, where you couldn't read the source code? Who would be comfortable with that? Because this is not a thing from the future, because we already have pacemakers, and there are people that refuse to have a pacemaker if they can't see the source. I would only want to have open source in my body, nothing else.
I just, for once in my life, I want to be able to slam dunk a basketball, and whatever technology allowed me to do that, I'm all for.
You know they make lower nets now.
Dylan, that's cheating.
So the corollary to that, yeah, you know, everyone's like, yes, I want open source. I want to be able to control the software running in my body. Would you want to share a street with people who had hacked the firmware on their own cars? You know, self-driving cars, and people out there have overridden the controls to say, kill the pedestrian, save me, any cost, I don't care. You know, it's a really, really difficult trade-off, because it's a trade-off between your safety versus the good of society. It's safety versus security. You know, what could possibly go wrong?
And having your eyes rebooted so that Microsoft can apply an update. Yes, just
while you're trying to land an aeroplane,
yes.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
And there's a guy off the Jersey Turnpike who's got his GPS tracker switched on, so you can't land using instruments. So who's come to PubCon? Yeah, it's all right. It's working. We are. We're getting the green shoots of recovery are showing.
So Pirate Bay. This is today. The European Court of Justice, as opposed to the European Court of anything else, has ruled that Pirate Bay are liable and responsible for the copyright infringement that happens through the Pirate Bay service. And see, I think Pirate Bay, obviously most of the stuff that's on there is movies. You don't see it so much with music now, because the people making the music have made it a lot easier to just get the music. You just pay a little bit of money to Spotify or whatever.
I did see a thing this morning. Spotify is now worth more than the entire music industry in the United States. The RIAA last year, music in America in the United States turned over about $6.97 billion, which is, you know, recordings, vinyl, CD, streaming, everything. And Spotify now has 8.9 billion in, you know,
market cap.
Yeah, market cap. So Spotify, the company, is worth more than the entire United States recording industry.
Yeah, there's something not right
now.
there.
I haven't bought a CD since I started using Spotify.
Yeah.
I buy vinyl because I'm a hipster who makes impulse purchases. But basically, Spotify stopped me paying for music. I pay for it, and I go to a lot more concerts, but I don't buy CDs anymore. It's kind of solved the problem of how do I listen to stuff I want to listen to.
I like the way that Pirate Bay's logo has got the cassette tape in it. And most of the people who use Pirate Bay have no idea what that is.
Does anyone in the room remember home taping is killing music?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the UK, we had a program on TV every week called Top of the Pops. And there was probably equivalents around the world. And when you were a kid, you used to have one of those like rectangular tape recorders with a built-in microphone, and we would sit there with Top of the Pops on with our one tape that we had, and every week just hold it up to the television to record the latest tunes.
You know, Top of the Pops was on the radio as well.
Was it?
You could actually record straight to tape.
I didn't have a tape recorder with a radio built in. This was 1976. This was like a long time ago.
I
wasn't even born then.
It was an amazing coincidence that the person that built the Pirate Bay is named Kim.com. I mean, I don't think what else was he going to do with his life? Go into farming? No.
So yeah, this is the news come through today. The Pirate Bay has been found. There's this whole thing, you know, they're saying, well, we don't share anything, any copyright infringing material. We just help people find each other, and what they do after that is their own business. And the court has said, no, you do things like you delete torrents that have been proved not to work. You're actually curating this, so you're not just a carrier, you're a publisher, and therefore you're all going to go to jail for the rest of your lives for giving away ones and zeros in special orders. So, but no, it's interesting. It's 7 years it's taken since they first had their equipment impounded for this to go through to court. And the verdict
for all those people that
today.
are downloading Green Lantern and watching it?
I mean, I think a lot of the problem, though, with a lot of the reason why piracy first sparked was because the owners of the copyrighted content made it so difficult for people to actually access it or to get it in formats other than the one they'd originally paid for. And I think unless that relationship changes, there's always going to be piracy. And part of the problem is, that something can come out effectively on which you can't access because you don't have that, access to it in your country. Australia has huge problems, for example, with, say, only one television channel carrying some of the shows people want to watch, and the quality is very poor. So people are obviously going to turn to piracy at that point because you've not distributed information to them. And so I think some of the blame for this falls upon the publishers and distributors for the mess they've made of actually coping with the real world and saying to people, yes, we know you want to get access to the content. We'll make it easy for you. Yes, we recognize you've already purchased this in another format. No, we're not going to charge you again, basically, for getting in a different format.
I have actually torrented stuff now that I have on DVD so that I can watch it on my laptop because my laptop no longer has a DVD player in it. And I want to rip it, but I can't rip it because it's copy protected, or I just don't have access to it, or I've left the DVD at home. But I don't see why I should pay for it again. So if you couldn't access the hotel Wi-Fi last night, it's because I was torrenting the Green Lantern.
It's a very interesting distinction. I'm really triggered by what you said. Like, obviously, people are going to like pirate stuff because they feel they feel it's okay because the content is there, but it's not accessible to them. I think it's a really interesting distinction there between law and ethics. We all think it's sort of okay to pirate stuff, especially, for example, if a show is already released in the US but it's not released in Europe, then I'm like, yeah, sure, Well, it's almost like you make me do it. I would pay money, but you make it impossible for me, which
absolutely.
is very interesting because basically you're saying about something that's technically illegal. Yeah, sure, we're all going to do it. So it's just, I just wanted to point out that that's super interesting that we all share ethics that isn't represented by the law. And this has been the case for, since Napster. That was a very long time ago. So it's also, there's a difference between what we all feel is okay and what's still in the law that isn't.
See, and I think that's why this is, I was sad, but I was sad like watching history pass, right? Because am I worried? I'll go ahead and say this. I'm in another country right now. We torrent happily and without regard. And I taught my son, who's 19 now, that there's really a gray area and a responsibility to the creators of the things that you want. You own a responsibility to them. But that there's a whole lot of middlemen who are just trying to pad their wallets and make it hard for you. And so he has a completely different set of ethics. And we talk about, he's like, is it illegal? And I'm like, well, we'll talk about that. He's 6 years old at the time. And I'm like, we'll talk about that a little more as we go into it. So he's lived his whole life being unplugged from television, from cable. We've been Plex TV users and torrenters for a long time. And it always goes in the succession of, if I can easily purchase it, we will. If we can't purchase it but can find it to purchase, we will. And then, I'm sorry, but you've made it too hard for me to be able to purchase it, so I'm going to torrent that shit. And that's what we do all the time. And so I realized the strangest reaction that I was surprised at my reaction when I heard about this, because I don't think it's going to risk that, because I think it's the cat's out of the bag, so to speak, right? I don't think there's anything I don't think it's going to dampen anything. They were pioneers in some sense, in some rebellious kind of way, I guess.
The one feature, we talked about Spotify and music streaming and stuff. The one feature I really want in Spotify, I'm a heavy Spotify user, and I would like to pay more. And I would like the extra money I pay to go directly to the musicians who created the music that I'm listening to. There's all these, the music industry is basically horrific for working musicians. You record a CD and the record company will advance you the cost of recording, which is maybe, £100,000 or dollars or euros. And out of that, you hire studio time, you pay all the expenses of recording, the band members have to eat and pay rent. And when you start selling CDs, the record company gets like $9.50 out of 10, and you get 50 cents. And out of that 50 cents, you have to repay your $100,000 advance before you get to actually take any money home. I know, it's crazy. And so, if there's musicians you want to support...
But they make money from touring.
They do make a lot of money from touring. Seriously, you want to support a band, the best way to do it is to go to their shows and buy T-shirts, buy stickers, buy merchandise, because they get almost all of that. But if anyone from Spotify is here or listening, let me pay, 30, 40, 50 pounds a month, and take your 10 quid that you need to pay to the record companies for the licensing and give the rest to the people I'm actually listening to and make it worth their while as musicians, as content creators, to use that platform because it's the best way of doing what they do. Right.
There's a question down there, just Mr.
There's a question, Mr. Skeet.
So how easy and cheap does it have to be before it is unethical and you would support it being illegal to pirate things? So, as an example, anyone can get hold of C# in depth. I don't know whether the 4th edition is available freely at the moment, but you can find C# in depth pretty damn easily.
A content creator speaks.
Right. Well, and I'm lucky. My wife writes children's books for a living. Huge numbers of them. They're relatively, they're hard copy only. Not a lot of piracy there, as far as I'm aware. But as far as I'm concerned, Manning is pretty good. You can get hold of C# in depth in PDF, EPUB, whatever format. There's no excuse in terms of that. There will be people who say, "Oh, but I can't afford however many dollars it is. I can't remember." Is that reasonable? At what point do you basically say, no, if you produce content, you need to accept that it will be pirated, and we won't say that anyone is unethical for doing that?
I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Well, I have no sense of self-preservation, so I'll tell you my point of view on it. I think that I can't speak for everyone, and that's one of the biggest issues I have with it, is the fact that these laws are created, and they're created like in God mode, where they apply to everyone. And different people have different circumstances and different needs. If it's the one thing stopping someone from getting gainful employment in order to change their lives and get outside of their own situation, then that to me is a different circumstance than, my neighbor who probably spends way too much money, on his weekend trips or whatever and decides he can't afford it, right? And so I think ultimately, I love Dylan's idea, and I think that it's always one of my favorite musicians, Jane Seabury, was one of the first people to offer her music on her own website. She broke away from a major label and she offered MP3s with a pay what you can kind of model. And you know how they show, Humble Bundle does this too, where they'll show, like, pay what you think it's worth. And invariably, people's good nature, we're entirely diabolical, but we're also really good natured. When it's directly to that content creator, there's a tendency for that to rise above the average cost, and then it goes directly to the content creator. And I think we're capable of doing that technologically. So I don't know why we need any kind of middleman service.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think that one of the issues we've had historically is that the publisher, eventually, the people in control of distribution of the product have been the ones that effectively make the money, not the content creators. And I think we're radically all agreeing that essentially we actually think content creators should be rewarded for their work. What we are more concerned about, I think, and I'm speaking for the group, is that the monopoly over distribution platforms and publishing has not kept pace with technology, and less of the slice of the pie should probably be earned by the distributors and more by the content creators.
Yeah. I would just like to say for the record that I have bought legitimate digital copies of both Bill Wagner's books.
So we could talk about digital rights distribution and content all day,
but we are out of time.
We are out of time. Well, we have one more slide.
Yes. So how did this happen?
So the reason I've got this in is
tiny hands too.
I have been talking with my people in the intelligence services, and I have figured out the true meaning of kofif. So what happened, there was a special operations division behind enemy lines in Iran trying to sabotage a nuclear fuel refinery. And they got in and they found there's these two buttons on this dashboard. And, one of them says Muhalla, the other one says kofif, and they didn't know which one to press. So they called a mathematician who did some calculus, And it came out, he had to integrate all of the mission parameters. And what happens when you do integrals in calculus, you get a constant emerges from the term. And this constant came out negative, and that wasn't in their mission plan. So they radioed headquarters, and they said, we got these 2 buttons, we don't know what to do, and we've integrated, the constant is negative, and then the communications got cut off. Yeah. And so, the White House in the Cobra room, they're like, we need to get a message out to these people. What can we do? And Trump comes in and he says, you know what? I've got this. And he taps that, despite the constant negative, press Kafif. Is probably not what actually happened, but I don't know. Anyway, we are out of time. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the party this evening. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Oh, we forgot to mention, who's going to PubCon?
Yes. Now, we've saved you all some time by rating this session for you. So, no, please. Take time to rate it on the way out. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to all the panel. Thank you, everyone. This has been a lot of fun.
Come to the pub quiz at the party as well. We're doing the quiz.
I think 9 o'clock tonight before Love Shack come on. So there's a quiz. There's a couple of bands from some of the sponsors going to be playing. There's free food. There's free booze. There's going to be a pub quiz. There's Love Shack, who are awesome, playing on the main stage later this evening. So don't go away. Stick around. Enjoy it. It's going to be a blast.
Thanks to all special guests, and we'll see you again.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.